Hi, thanks for joining me today. I am the chapter head for SoundGirls in Alberta. My name is Christina Milinusic. SoundGirls' mission is to create a supportive community for women in audio and music production. We provide the tools, knowledge, and support to further their careers while inspiring and empowering the next generation of women in audio. The SoundGirls Living History Project is a collection of interviews with audio industry veterans. The project seeks to highlight the careers and achievements of women and underrepresented groups in audio. Today I will be interviewing Teresa Leonard, who is an internationally recognized music producer and audio educator. She has worked in the audio industry for over 30 years, holds degrees in both music and education, and has served as the Audio Engineering Society's president and education chair. Please welcome.
Well, thank you very much. It's very nice to be interviewed for SoundGirls, Christina, and I'm so happy that you asked me to do this. Title right now, I'm freelance. I have been in the past director, executive producer, music producer, consultant, all of those things. I've had a very varied career. The one thing I will mention, you mentioned I have degrees in music and audio, which are both undergrad degrees, but then I also have a Master of Sound Recording degree from McGill University that I did later. So that's my background. And sometimes when 30 or 40 years have gone by since you started your first job in music, it's hard to know where to start to talk about what I've done, but I'll give it a shot. So having studied music when I was younger, I was a pianist, and I also did some work in education, and was offered a teaching job actually in Newfoundland, my first teaching job. So I took that versus continuing study as a pianist because I would be paid quite well. And following that year, I decided to get an education degree, not knowing that that would serve me very well in the future. And then I taught in French and English schools in Eastern Canada for a few years. And I come from a long line of teachers. My mom was an educator for many years and one of my great mentors. And a colleague of mine actually told me about the program at McGill University. And that's not something I say very often, and nor have I thanked him over the years. I haven't seen him forever, but we all have chances, or there's serendipity in all our lives. And he told me about this program in audio. It's not something that I had studied or looked into. So when I did, I decided to go ahead and apply and go to McGill University, having been a teacher of music with some professional background. And so that was a great experience because we're talking about SoundGirls and women in audio. I was in a program, I did notice, with mostly men. And there were a few women in the undergraduate program there. I did an undergraduate a couple years, actually. I spread the coursework out because I was dealing with electronic music, electroacoustics, math, psychoacoustics, all kinds of things, introduction to sound recording. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is all new to me. But obviously it was just me being a bit, afraid of all of the coursework. But I also continued my piano practice at the time. So it was a long master's. And then I was one of 4 people originally to be accepted into the master's program. It was a great experience. And I was the only woman in my class, although it never did bother me, or I didn't think much of it at the time. I also, to go backwards, grew up with all brothers and a very strong mom. So it was all fine. And when I left McGill, I was offered a job in post-production in Canada, and I did that for a little while. It was also a very good experience working for a TV show. But then an opportunity came up at the University of Iowa, and so in music, and I decided that's where I needed to be because I still had a lot to learn, and that was my strength, working with musicians and working in music. So one thing I've forgotten is when I left McGill, I was accepted at the Banff Centre in a work-study program that I ended up growing and running for over 20 years. But I did not begin that program, and that's something that is misunderstood, and people give me credit for starting it, and I did not. That was David Keln, who was also a McGill grad, first brought me from McGill to Banff. I had planned to go for 3 months and stayed 2 years. He was interested in my thesis topic. You've asked about that. We were the last class at McGill to have to do a thesis because there was so much coursework interjected into that program. And so I had to go to work and write a thesis when I left McGill, and so that took a few years. I started it at Banff in my internship program, where I went for 3 months and stayed 2 years because I was hired in summers to work with musicians and to do recordings as one person hired to do that. So I guess if you do a good job where you are as a student, then you might be hired back. And so I finished that thesis while I was at the University of Iowa, working with Lowell Cross, who built that audio program. It was a wonderful experience. And I got to work with Hansher Auditorium, an amazing theater group of people. And so I got to record some things like the Takash String Quartet at the theater, was involved when the Kronos Quartet came through. Prince, I think, premiered things like Purple Rain there. So lots of wonderful experiences, and working with the musicians and staff at the University of Iowa. I was also mentoring a lot of the students who took a course with Lowell. My title was recording engineer, so I mentored these people, and a lot of those people went on and did great things. Not that I'm responsible for all of their work, but we do have an impact on people, and just like this person who told me about McGill had an impact on me. So there were many people from Iowa that went on and did great things. Then I was invited by Isabel Ralston, who was the music director at the Banff Centre at the time, classical music, to come back to Banff and to grow a program that they had just titled Music and Sound. So, and that was Robert Rosen who had come up with that idea, and he worked in the music area as a composer. And so I had the great opportunity, having been to Banff and seen what an international destination that was, not only for people in the arts. It was a center for performing arts, for literary arts, for indigenous arts, a center for conferences. So there were hotels and meal plans and everything else there. Very international. So this was a real opportunity for me, having my education background, strong mentoring, I said, from my mom and also from Vyacheslav Oschek at McGill University. I watched the way he stood up for audio as an art form. And that's what kept me interested in it for so long. So I always stood up for audio and all of the participants as artists. And I was able to follow the program the way it had been set up at the music department. So that we brought in guest faculty and brought in artists from around the world in audio, same as with music. And because Banff grew to deal not only with classical music, which was very strong, but also jazz, big jazz program, and which became another name, but a contemporary music composition. And we dealt with an indie band festival. First started at Banff Centre in large part due to the audio program, because we had great studios, but also nice halls to work with and record in. So people learned how to record acoustic music in acoustic spaces, which is not always stressed enough in recording programs, especially within music schools. We had wonderful studios where we got to work with on film scoring projects with artists of all genres, with visual artists, etc. So even though there was a very, very strong focus on music recording, which was, our real strength at Banff, and still is, we could do many other things. And I was able to grow the program by actually, through my work that I got into with the Audio Engineering Society, as education chair and as chairing some of the education events at different conferences. I got to meet so many students from Canada, the US, internationally, and then went to speak to some of those programs while I was in Europe. And so we had people at Banff Tonmeister programs from Paris, Poland, Detmold, Berlin, other programs in France like Louis Lumière, which was more film in concentration, McGill, New York, Peabody, all kinds of music recording programs, also programs that dealt with post-production. We brought people from the Vancouver Film School. We brought people from the real world who had not gone through schooling, as happened early on in audio. And in one case, I had someone who came from high school from down the road in Banff and went on to win many Grammys. And that person basically got all of his training at Banff Centre because, he was just such a talent. And so all that to say, I really believe in a distributed teaching model. And not only for Banff and internship programs. I mean, I said I would forego some staff in order to have more money to bring in outside people from academia and industry. And then when I need it, finally you get more staff. But this created a really rich program. So you could bring in faculty from academia and industry to either work directly on projects with students, and I call them students, but they're work studies or practicum participants. These are people with skill. But coming to Banff to get more professional experience in a great environment, safe environment, being mentored, knowing that someone has their back. There are no stupid questions. And I'm very grateful. I mean, at Banff Centre, yes, I brought something to Banff because of my background in music education and audio, but being able to work at such an international destination, especially with the level of musician we got to record there. That's something that doesn't always happen at a university or a school. So that was wonderful. And the adjunct faculty was another big plus. And students coming from the real world, from many different levels, from high school to PhD programs, and interacting with each other. My job a lot of the time was to be a facilitator, to help put the right people on right projects, to ensure if we needed more professionalism that I brought in a producer or an engineer that they could in turn work with. And those people always knew that they were invited to Banff to give back. And so, we really instilled a professionalism, not only for the audio group, but for musicians and other artists to respect the audio team as equal artists and to respect our time, to be on time for sound checks. And so I guess I would say in 30 years of being able to work with a variety of incredible artists in recording studios, I also had the opportunity to grow this program over 20 years at the Banff Centre. And one thing I will say is I've seen over and over again the importance of recording technology, not only for audio engineer and producers, aspiring audio engineers and producers, but for musicians themselves. And what we were able to offer a musician is something that I think programs today have to continue to do and build in as part of their program. So everybody's speaking the same language. Technology is growing, as you know, and with what's happened with our pandemic, a lot of people don't realize that a lot of these recordings we see online now, 75% of the work is in post-production, people trying to fix it. And, we still want to ensure that we have quality of sound and that people understand the importance of learning microphone technique, understanding equipment, understanding new technologies. And today, of course, students need to know audio, video, and, be an artist themselves. So it's quite an exciting field to work in. It's kept me young, I think. So I will say that the AES, having mentioned AES through my work in Banff, is really a great a great society to become a member of as a young person. And, the top end, the high end with, the people that have made the biggest impact on our industry are a lot of them are always there at these conferences or conventions. And now you can find them online. And I've noticed a lot of things are free lately. And I still take in as much as I can. Because what always excited me about what I was able to build was that this was continuing education, not only for myself and for the participants in the program, but for the staff. And so everybody grew at the same time. And it's a nice way to go to work, and it's a nice way to live. Time flew, but I'm proud of what I've left there. And I'm also very grateful because of Banff being an international destination with all of its facilities like hotels and dining hall, etc. I was able to put on conferences. So, for example, when I saw a gap in the program where there might be 2 weeks where there wasn't a lot of recording or a lot of artists in-house, or, I use that as a time to bring in adjunct faculty to put on seminars where we could bring in outside people to work with the small group of, participants at Banff. There's always, I don't know, around 8 to 10 people. So they got to take part in that conference, and by, hosting a conference, you were able to open it up to other people as well. I also started recording residencies there, which was a real, there's a lot of business involved with that. But it was important that if we were going to do professional recordings for people, that we charged an appropriate amount, and that we took in projects that weren't competing with commercial studios nearby, but that made sense for Banff Centre and allowed us to do professional recording and editing within a very supervised area. I mean, it was wonderful for musicians to go, or any artists, for a recording residency or a writing residency or wherever, where they're not having to think about cooking their meals. And it was just such an international group of people. And the participants or work studies in audio learned more from each other than they did the faculty I bring in. I say that a lot, I know, but it's true, because coming from different cultures, and there is such strength in diversity. And, so I'll let you ask a question now, because I did this for so long I can go on about it, but it must be better if you direct me.
Absolutely fascinating. I'm just so impressed by all you've achieved in your career, and thankful for what you've done. And one of the things I'm very interested in knowing is, was there a person or experience early in your life that got you, interested in audio, or sparked that interest in audio? Was it piano? Was it your mom? What really got you into it?
I think I was a good educator. I loved the students, and I had a real rapport with them. I think I started, to be honest, when you asked me a few questions when we first talked about doing this, I didn't want to think too much about it. But I thought I did a lot of teaching, in a sense, when I was younger. I taught piano when I was in high school to other people. And so that was, without realizing it, it was a way to make a little money. But it also taught me about teaching and empathy and working with younger people. I also did a lot of babysitting. And so, I worked a lot as a child. I mean, I started working as soon as I could at 16. So I had a lot of experience before I went into music and education. I wasn't a typical, I didn't know about the program initially. I wasn't somebody who was drawn initially to technology. I certainly can learn it, and I used all of the editing programs up until Pyramix, the one I should know, our Pro Tools. But in my music degree, we had listening classes, and in history, and for some reason, I did really well on these tests. And it wasn't that I was better than anyone or understood the music or the composers better than other people in my class. I think I had a good ear. I somehow memorized the sound. So I was able to identify pieces that way. And when I was teaching music, what always surprised me, and I taught from grades 1 through 9, band and, choirs in elementary and flûte à bec and French. And students, they will give you what you expect of them. And so they could, tell the difference. If I did something in classical, for example, they'd know if it was Bach or Beethoven. This ages me, but drop the needle. And I realized I liked the sound of certain recordings and not the sound of others. So then when I was told about this program, I found it intriguing because my colleague at the time knew that I wasn't necessarily wanting to continue teaching music, but I wanted to do something with what I'd done. And so that opened up, quite a surprising area. I mean, when I was first accepted into the master's program itself, I had to really think about, do I want to do this? Do I want to go down this road? Because I had also become interested in other subjects at McGill. But anyhow, I did it, and I ended up with great experience, and I was able to help people find work in the industry and help put people together, and use my background to, I think, make a difference for those participants. And in turn, they gave me so much. When you're mentoring, you get so much back as well, and you learn a lot. So I was really a caretaker, a facilitator, and I was there a lot. I worked a lot. When you have a program and people don't show up to see what somebody is doing, there might not be this intense awareness by the participants to be careful, because somebody may be dropping in on you to see how it's going.
Well, I think your thesis, I read it a few weeks ago, and it's still, for me, it clarified a bunch of things, because I think it's called time delay compensation of distributed multiple microphones in recording. And
environmental evaluation. I remember the title because it was Dr. Vozcek at McGill that helped me with that title, and he was very good with titles. That's I facilitated a lot of research at Banff as well, because people would say, oh, you have such great listeners. Can we, Universal Audio or a former PhD participant from Oxford, they wanted to come to Banff and do, research because of the environment. So again, all of those things helped us grow. But you're asking about the thesis. Yes, I had to write a thesis, and it ended up being a great thing. And while I was in Iowa, I met John Ergel while I was writing this, and he was very complimentary and said to me, you should present this at AES. And I thought, oh my gosh, AES, I hadn't even been there yet. I was a little intimidated. So, what I can say to anyone that might be watching this, but especially to women, is, I started later in audio. I was into my 20s and well into them, and because I'd had a career ahead of time. And I was nervous about presenting something in technology at AES, and I did, and I had, people say wonderful things. And I learned quickly that, you can break those barriers. And I ended up being president of the AES through my work in education, because of the work I did at Banff, so it trickles, down. I think a lot of times today with education, people have this idea that they have to go all the way through and get, some titles so that they can make more money or teach at a certain, I think I was lucky that I followed my passion and let it take me where it would. And, you're going to run into things, but basically I've had, a very good career, which I'm very grateful for. And I'm now I'm now working at Aspen, but wasn't this summer due to the pandemic. The audio program itself was canceled, although they have moved into video, which is really, really nice, because everyone, if we don't do that, we're going to be left behind. And so I had the great pleasure last summer, 2019, my first year at Aspen, to work for an incredible international, mainly classical but contemporary music festival. I don't like the word classical because it delineates so many other things, and there were many, many great compositions that happened there. But that's a place where there's less time to train and work alone in the studios. People have to hit the ground running when they arrive. Still, I would love to be able to build more of a faculty layer to Aspen in the future if we could, even if it's bringing in a producer to work with a director, so that we do more recording. And again, as I said, you know, what musicians gain by working with a producer is different than working with a coach. And so last year I gave a paper called The Producer's Educator at the Art of Record Production. And I believe really strongly this is something that benefits musicians. I saw how it benefited hundreds and hundreds, if not more, of musicians at Banff over the years. And many became interested in audio and vice versa. I also saw how audio built bridges. Yeah, I mean, I have really seen how audio, especially with, you know, intertwined with video, can work with film departments, can work with composition areas. I've had composers sit in on recording sessions who have said, oh my gosh, you know, like, this is amazing. You know, how do you do this? Because as a producer, you're working with the engineers in the studio, you're listening to the artists, you have one ear on noises, and a lawnmower outside right now, and you have another ear on the music, and you're listening to what the musicians say, making sure everything's great in the recording studio, and serving the composer's needs who's sitting behind you. So we wear a lot of hats in audio, and this can be, you know, a real eye-opener to composers, and even having different genres of music. I mean, one thing I saw when we had an indie band residency at Banff, we brought in string players to perform on one of the pieces, and we brought the bands over to see a classical music concert. And it just amazes me, not only the producer I had brought in, you know, who was a great indie producer, said, you know, can I get the names of, you know, your favorite classical CDs, or, you know, classical players being introduced to working in the studio with pop musicians. I mean, they hung out together. It's just, we can bridge those gaps in audio. Things don't have to be so separated. And if they're not separated, people tend to learn way more from each other. So having had the luxury of working my own work and choosing to stay there for so long, despite being offered other things, was mainly because of what I got to do with education that was different than what I might have been able to do in university or school. So, yeah. It was a choice.
It's interesting, that lateral thinking, you know, even what you're talking about, calculating time delay, you're talking about using it for, you know, spot microphones and microarrays, but we use it all the time to time align PA systems. So this stuff can really be applied to different areas.
Oh, and yeah, I mean, I got off track with that again. That was the one time I did research that was published. Well, I did other research, but it was in collaboration, facilitating at Banff. But yeah, time delay compensation now, you can dial it in on a console or do it yourself. It's a tool. But really what amazed me when I did that work was the fact that it did improve my ear-brain capacity to hear time delays. And I could tell you if it was 12 milliseconds, 10 milliseconds, whatever at the time. I was really tuned into it. I had trained my brain. That I found really interesting. And there's tons of work that's been done since then. But, you know, sometimes it was good to have the exact amount of delay that you needed, gave you that depth within an orchestra. And I did this between orchestras and small chamber groups as well. Other times to have the delay, you know, a much shorter delay or no delay at all, or have the delay before the main mics. I mean, it's a tool. You have to know the science and technology behind what you're doing. A lot of people try to skip that today, I find, in recording, because it's easy to use a workstation, or everybody has Pro Tools on their computer, or whatever else they use. But I really pushed understanding, and that's why I bring in faculty from old school, younger and older faculty. We had the pleasure at Banff of having people like John Ergel, you know, talk about mic technique and mic placement in his recordings, amazing recordings with orchestra. At one time, I actually, early on in my time at Banff, I put on a conference with John Ergel, Bob Ludwig, and George Massenberg called Mixing, Miking, and Mastering. And so you just went after it, and they all said yes. I mean, it's a great destination. And so we had an amazing conference with so few people. And at the time, I was also putting together something for tutorials were new at AES. I think these might have been some of the first ones, but I put some of these together, and the people at the time at AES thought, oh, this is for education. She's working with that group, so we'll put it at 8 a.m. And honestly, you couldn't get in the room. There were 200 people lined up to get in, or not 200, but 200 in, and a lineup still for others to get inside the room, because these topics were important, not just for students, but for continuing education for all of us in audio. And that's how I like to run education. I'm not alone in that, but I did see early on at the AES where, students were kind of put in rooms with their own learning, although this amazing conference was going on. And we tried to change that, and it's much different now. And that's a good thing, because in the same way that, students in grade 1 or 2, you can expect a lot more of them. You can certainly expect a lot more of young people at AES conventions to be able not only to listen to some of these talks, but to be able to add their voice. So. And
correct me if I'm wrong, but John Ergel wrote one of the microphone books.
Yeah, recording, musical recording technologies, many volumes he did. Yeah. Yeah, and having those three people, he and Bob Ludwig and George Massenberg, who all respected each other so much in the same room, was very inspiring for anybody who was at that conference. And we did a few more of them later on. That wasn't just the only one. And we did also professional producing conferences for classical music as well there. And then one AES International Conference on Surround Sound, which was, a great way to draw attention to where I was working and draw attention to the audio program as well. So that was fun times, a lot of work.
Yeah.
On to new things, and I continued to consult and working for Aspen and do music production, which I love to do, working with artists. So yeah, we'll see where it takes me. I have many colleagues, not many, but a few, who try to talk me into giving papers and writing more about what I've done. But I'm somebody I realize who prefers to do. Even to talk about this, I had to write a lot of things down because I knew I'd forget them. My mind works a bit overtime, but that, I'm just, really, I need to say I'm grateful, because I was given opportunities that, I was prepared for. And, when you're prepared and you have this incredible opportunity to build on what your background is, it's a gift. So I'm thankful, and I'm thankful that I'm working in different places now and continuing to use the knowledge that I have. But my biggest strength probably is as an educator or a mentor, that kind of role. Even as a producer, that's what you're doing a lot of the time.
So can you talk about the mentorship? And I know you've done a lot of mentoring for engineers around the world that have gone on to do some pretty amazing things. So what have you what kind of things have you learned from mentoring, and who are some of the women in particular that you have mentored over?
Okay, I wasn't going to mention any names because and then I will now, but I realized, sometimes people will hear one name and they'll know that person, and so they write about it. Like people have interviewed me a couple times for things, and I read that and I think, that's like highlighting one person, and there were like so many. But okay, women. I mean, when I was at the University of Iowa, 17-year-old or 16, Poppy Crum, who is now the head scientist for Dolby and a neuroscientist, and who studied at McGill also did a stint at Banff, Berkeley, postdoc at Johns Hopkins. I mean, I don't want to say what she's done because she's better to tell you that. But I was a mentor to her. She came in to do a recording. She was in high school at the time with her mom, and then asked about taking that course that Lowell offered at the University of Iowa, and worked in the studio where I was mentoring and recording engineer. And so, yeah, she and Reed Kruger, someone else went on and did really well, also went to Banff. Brian Sarvis ended up going to McGill. So because I was there, I think I had an influence on those people in the world of audio. And obviously, you know, being a woman, that was a nice thing for someone like Poppy or who else? So many women. Amandine Prat, who came to Banff from, that you're working with, from Paris. That program had so many women. Anne-Laure Guittet, you know, Coralie Vincent, Mireille Faure, all these women who came through Banff. We tended to have an amazing relationship with the Conservatory in Paris, just because they had such amazing training in music and technology, but didn't have the opportunity to really do the hands-on and professional work and be mentored to get that sense of, I mean, they're working at the Conservatory of Paris, so it's hard to develop that confidence in recording with people when you're at such a prestigious school. So Banff was a really good place for them. They've all gone on, you know, Marion Schweibel, who was at Banff when I first went back, she's, you know, she was a producer for Bis. Marie Ebbing, who met her husband at Banff, Jonathan, names, they would kill me, but Jonathan. But anyhow, see, I try not to do the name thing because I'll forget last names. Anyhow, she ended up working with Mark Wilshire, who was one of my first students at Banff, who went on to work for, you know, Peter Jackson, Lord of the Rings. He's in the UK right now. Worked at Skywalker. He hired Marie. So a lot of times the earlier people that went through Banff that came back later as faculty, I would encourage them to always hire somebody who was really good and needed the same opportunity that they were given because they met somebody while they were at Banff. So Sean Evarts, the person that came from Bragg Creek, just down the road from high school, and you know, I say this a lot, but he could, you know, turn a bread box into a composition just because he's so amazing with sound. But Banff gave him the opportunity to experiment. At one point, we hosted Stanford's summer school, CARMA, Center for Computer Research in Music and Acoustics, and I put Sean in that course because they were building musical instruments. So here was somebody with a high school background working with a PhD at Stanford and doing amazing work. They learned from each other. He ended up going back and forth to Banff. Sean did for many years because he was also touring and doing other things. So yeah, I like to think that we had a lot to do with his, you know, audio training, and he didn't fit the normal school. I remember that somebody who was mentoring Sean had said to me, well, he doesn't want to be involved in recording the string quartet competition. I said, oh, yes, he does. And because he did that, he became interested in Bartók. So you had to have people go back and forth between the studio and you know, the hall and learn about things that might not be their strength. I didn't force people to spend tons of time, but they had to be exposed to what they could learn from other genres. That's a long-winded answer. So Sean, Poppy, Mark, and Marie, Amandine, there's so many women, so many. Jennifer Nolson, who, yeah, and Tung, who was at Banff as well from Peabody. I hired both of them for Aspen. I had to have people with U.S. citizenship to work as staff at Aspen, and to be honest, even though, you know, I wasn't hiring people internationally, at Aspen last summer, there were 11 of us total. And I didn't do this on purpose, but there were 6 women and 5 men. So in my experience, without really trying, there were equal numbers basically over the years at Banff. And I think recording programs based in music schools have a larger percentage of women. But you know, people like Terry Winston, I don't know her personally, but I followed a little bit what or read about what she has built with Women's Audio Mission, and they go into middle schools now, and I think that's where you're going to make the bigger impact. You know, same with technology and engineering and things going into the schools. Having been a school teacher, I know the impact that can have. So yeah, and today with Zoom, I mean, what SoundGirls is doing is so impressive. And see, I'll leave and have forgotten to mention that. But the fact that I didn't know about SoundGirls until you contacted me, and I thought, I'm a woman in audio, so we just have to blow our own horn a little bit. But look, I'll even say AES has to remember this too when they're putting panels together. I mean, it's not like I go searching for women, and I know James, who's continuing the program at Banff, James Clemencealey, has said to me he doesn't have to look. They're just, you know, he'll take the best person. And, you know, once in a while you're forced with, okay, I have two people equal quality here, and, you know, maybe then you'd say, well, I'm going to give the female the chance, you know, because they're equal. But I don't know. I mean, I don't see a dividing line between, I think we all have many sides. We all have our right and left brain. We have our masculine and feminine tendencies. And today, thankfully, you know, things have changed. And so there are more opportunities for however anybody identifies culturally, sexually. You know, there's room for everybody. And I'm so happy to see that changing. But again, I think why it happened with me is I just, it didn't feel right. I mean, it wouldn't feel right if it was like completely a school with, you know, no women or completely, you know, and I think we have the responsibility to change that. So I worked in schools where there were some difficult students and, you know, some low income areas. And it would have been easy to ignore the quiet students and always deal with those needing the attention. And you have to find a way to point things out to the students, to let them know it's not fair, it's not equal. And you can do that at any age. It's funny, as we get older, we're not as, we don't adhere as much to those lessons we learn early in life. But yeah, with continuing education and, you know, new technologies, you know, leaning towards empathetic technologies, I think that, again, they're just tools. Artificial intelligence, another tool. Doesn't mean you push it away any more than you pushed away, you know, the computer. But we have to be able to be discerning with the tools and with how we put programs together, how we teach. And with Zoom today and with SoundGirls out there, I mean, if AES is looking for, you know, a panel of people and it's all men, then just go to SoundGirls and, you know, pick a few, because they're amazing. I was looking at this and I thought, I didn't know all these women existed. I love the way that SoundGirls are doing it. I love the way that Women's Audio Mission is doing it. Years ago at AES, there was called Women in Audio. And for a while, I wasn't as intrigued by it because it seemed the conversation was, you know, a bit more negative experiences in studios. And I think there's a better way. I'm not saying that it was wrong. It just wasn't my way of dealing with, you know, how we improve what we do. I mean, we just have to showcase who was out there. We didn't do as good a job of that as we should have years ago, but we're doing a better job now.
One of the things that was pointed out to me and had to be pointed out to me is when you're the only woman on a team, sometimes you can actually be intimidating. And I never thought of myself as being, like, I always thought about, oh, I'm intimidating, like being the only, but we can too. And so it's also on us to approach it and be like, hey, well, why are less than 10% of the papers and panels at AES women and presented by women? It's like, well, maybe we need to approach this in a way where we're just at the table too, and that's just the way it is, and we are capable, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of approaching it, and I'm not dismissing it either, but just more welcoming to be accepted too.
It's interesting what you say. I mean, I would encourage you, given what we've discussed. I know I've talked a lot about me today, which always leaves me feeling a little odd, but you have this great opportunity now going back to school and with everything you've done. I mean, I'm always impressed. I've always been impressed with, the participants that I bring into the program. Many know way more than I do, which is really helpful. I like to surround myself with smart people, but no, you just approach it as though, you have the right to be there. I think, some people ask me, has it been a benefit to be a woman? In some cases, yes, I would say. And have you reached some glass ceilings because you've been a woman? In some cases, yes, no matter how high that ceiling can be. People might not be ready for it. But yeah, I mean, I've not tried to be very political, but I have tried to stand up for what I thought was right. Yeah, you could do anything you wanted to do is what I would tell you. Yeah. Yeah, and it's not about men not promoting women or women not promoting women, both of which can happen. Mm-hmm. It's about being fair and to everybody and noticing what they're worth. Yeah, you'll run into things. I did. I tend not to concentrate on that. Some things you have to move on, forgive. You sometimes don't forget certain things, but you hopefully learn from them. But it's also easier to stand up for other people than yourself sometimes as a woman. I will say that. I've learned that about myself even, because we have a tendency to be very detail oriented and very focused on fixing things. And I'm not saying men aren't, but I think that is something probably I've noticed that I just did automatically. And maybe that's inherent in what I had to face with a career in audio, a long time ago. So starting 30 years ago or whatever. I mean, starting seriously. I started teaching 40 years ago. So I was very young, but yeah.
I love what you said earlier about not necessarily only listening to the loudest thing, because oftentimes we do mask other people's voices and just because something's just so loud in the mix, and we are listeners as audio people, and we are responsible for changing those levels in the mix. And maybe if something is like peaking and peaking and peaking, we could, there's subtractive mixing too, and there's additional listening. But the problem with always adding and adding is it just gets noisier and noisier and harder to understand. And so just listening and listening to those people that aren't necessarily the first to say something. And I think that's just such an important thing in education and for society as well.
That's our job. Yeah, making sure that everybody has a voice and in a quiet way. I think it was Tung last summer at Aspen that said to me, very bright young woman, she works for Saturday Night Live now, said, the interesting thing about Teresa, she always made you think it was your idea. And I thought, it's funny to hear those things because you think, oh, I didn't realize I did that. But I think in trying to convince someone to do something, and letting them know that they're capable of doing it is really important. It's interesting to hear you talk because you obviously have a very artistic mind. And I see that. And there are I see many women as producers, and I think that's part of it. And sometimes it's difficult with that kind of mind to focus in on one answer when you're interviewing somebody. But I think you're right. Listening is so important. Listening classes are so important. Listening to the music, listening to the technology, listening for noises, critical listening. Opening those classes to all musicians in a school, not just the audio program, will help you develop a language back and forth, especially today where musicians are going to be recorded so much for Zoom and live TV and everything else. But listening in life, yeah. Easy to do when you're with your one-on-one with people in your program, and very important. I think when people know you have their back, they will open up more and they will be more likely to succeed. And it's easier to do that when you're working with participants than, I've seen some people who can be tough and out there and stand up for everything, but I've seen them when they're with students, and I see how they work, and I think, wow, they're amazing mentors and really great. Amandine is one of those people. I've seen her working in New York and, at Banff in different places. And yeah, I mean, because we're talking about women, I'm mentioning women now, but yeah, people who walk the walk and really, really do that. You get so much back. So I think being in an educational world is can be really fulfilling.
Have you noticed any change, like trends that have changed during your time in this industry? Like, what's different now than when you first started out?
Well, besides using a razor blade to splice tape, even in Iowa, that far back, what's different? Well, those amazing studio recordings and using all of that incredible gear, which is so important to still have and to teach some of that. But we have to the gear that you buy for your program has to be something that is practical as well. So you learn the concepts and you learn analog and digital, but and I prefer to use faders versus just a mouse for clicking everything. I think you hear better that way. But the quality of sound, people are wearing headphones all the time now, not listening so much. Stereo is moving to immersive audio big time, fast. And, it's important to understand stereo microphone techniques and then let it go to do something else. But yeah, teaching audio, it's really teaching audio and video together. And in some places, unfortunately, there were places where video would see themselves as separate from audio, and audio was a service to video, in the same way that some music programs would see audio as a service to music. I never liked that. We have to be equal partners. And I think where that is changing today is that people who do audio also know video, thank goodness, because they can do both. And people who know video are understanding more and more the importance, I think, of audio to the final product. So that's changing. And with new technologies, emerging technologies, people are recording in their basements, and, the large studio is not what people go to, although Skywalker and Abbey Road and all of those places are incredible for your ears, like the sound that can move you. And my pet peeve has always been that education today, governments today, everyone today, we don't do enough about training people about the importance of their ears and sound pollution. There's a whole generation of people that aren't going to be able to hear. And I think AES needs to do more in that area. They do quite a bit, but it needs to be way more. It needs to be easier to understand. We need to, not that people don't understand, but make it accessible to, elementary, middle school, high school students especially, and parents who send kids off to concerts with no hearing protection. The subtlety won't matter if we can't hear it. So that's something that if I was starting out again, that's probably something I'd want to do. Either that or music producing as a complete field, because we can reach a whole generation of people that they're just not being taught. And there's a science to prove it. So I think we need to do better.
I know there's quite a profound difference between just noise bylaws comparing Europe to North America, and the awareness around just, what is a destructive level of noise.
Yeah.
Even like in our daily lives.
We had someone from Florian Kammerer from Vienna speak a few times at Banff on that. Again, I drew people from AES to come into Banff. I also ran an Alberta section of the AES for many, many, many years from Banff, more than you're supposed to, because people would go there to, they would come in from Edmonton, Calgary, and I was able to bring in faculty. So I had to share that. And that was a nice way to meet the community and bring in a lot of local people into the studios as well, and train them as well, both locally, nationally, and internationally. It's important.
Actually, Dave Horax, who runs the Alberta chapter, is the person who said, "Hey, you should really interview Teresa."
Oh, that's nice. Again, Dave was one of those people, was local. So bringing in local faculty, I mean, my gosh, he's a mastering engineer, one of the best teachers we had. And he could, all of a sudden I'd see a gap in the program and think, Dave, can you come in this week? Like, we have time. We'd like to get everyone together. And he'd come in and do a class. So we had lots of wonderful, wonderful people like that. Yeah, I mean, so many people benefited so much and still write me today. I find it interesting that I'll get letters from participants wanting me to write them a letter, and they're, postdoc and doing this. And I think, why do you want a letter from me? And at this point, and they say, well, because you knew my work, like, Banff was a pivotal moment for me. And we, at one point, there was some money at the center they didn't know what to do with it for training in broadcasting. And I said, we can do that. So alongside what we were doing in recording, and it was for women, actually. So we trained women in broadcasting, and they had to be Canadian. So it was through CBC and Chorus Entertainment, I believe. And that was just wonderful, because I brought in some faculty that were, radio voices and producers to work with them. So they in turn interviewed some of the audio people, and they also assisted on concerts. And so, you did that kind of training alongside other things you were doing. And that was really interesting. But I've gone off topic again, I know. Sorry.
I appreciate it. Do you have any advice, like to young women especially, but just young people that are starting out in the audio industry? Like, what do you wish you knew when you first started out that you know?
That's a really good question. I wish I knew that just because I might not have been so interested in one aspect, and I thought, oh, I can't do this because I don't really, love talking about quantization or, programming, or certain areas that, I could do but didn't interest me as much, that I could do it. I mean, I ended up in this television show, going to a place where if the show didn't get off the floor in a week, they were moving it to Toronto. This was in Nova Scotia. I went back there, and I had to learn that console inside out, and I had to be in touch with Japan with questions about it. It was a fairly new console at the time. And I did it. And yet I also should have known that when things stop working as well, and there are too many sort of doors closing to what you see as being beneficial, maybe move on and do something else. And also that you don't have to know everything. Surround yourself with people that are experts in that area, and go with what your strength is. I was, like I said, into my 20s when I started at McGill, and was a little nervous about AES or presenting a paper there. And I ended up being president of AES. So we're all just people. I mean, even doing this interview today, I got a little nervous. I mean, there's no reason. If I was talking to you one-on-one, I'd be more focused and, not feeling I have to cover everything in case I miss something, which is probably what I'm doing a little bit of today. But that we all have something to bring to the table, and that there are enough people that are going to give you credit for what you do, that you don't just listen to those voices that are negative. And that's something that I think I'll aim that one a little bit towards women. Not so much that it doesn't happen to men. They're very sensitive across genders. I've met tons of people that are strong in one area, weak in another. But, as females, I don't concentrate on that. Concentrate more on the successes you've had, and the people that you've helped, and the good work you've done, and what musicians say, like, hear that. Don't push that away, like really hear it when people give you credit for what you deserve credit for. And yeah, I think that's probably good advice, but also to look for strengths around you, look for partnerships, find mentors. Don't be afraid to talk to the person whose work you admire. If they're in audio, they're probably nice. Duh. And, they'll talk to you. And, maybe I've learned a little bit about that, being Canadian and then living in the US for quite a while, or working there and working abroad, consulting. I've learned that as Canadians too, we can be a little like intimidated by pushing forward. And probably my strength in really helping grow the program at Banff Centre, even though I'd been a part of it with both David Kellman and Kevin Elliott, was, my ability to go back and say, okay, let's follow this model now that we're music and sound. Let's do the faculty. Let's do the conferences. Let's make sure that we have sound checks for every concert. Let's make sure we get the right equipment. Let's make sure we're involved in that, literary conference over here that we can do audio for it. And, I was able to build on something because I'd been prepared for it. And so if you're teaching at a university, look for other programs that you can align with. And if, you're in a music program where the musicians might not be at the caliber that they would be at, Aspen or Banff, still like, bring in outside artists to record that can work with both areas. I mean, there's so many things you can do to up the level of education, and within budget. There's a lot you can do within budget. Look locally. I brought in people from, locally that, may not have been at a university, but they were in the profession, and they were some of the best teachers we ever had. They'd never taught before. I remember, someone like Joe Furla, he was from New York, but bringing him in to work with jazz, and he loved it, and just, gained a lot of people that have worked in the industry for a long time and haven't been able to teach. They get so much from teaching, and they learn as much from the group. When you have smart students or practicum participants, whatever we call them, they learn a lot from them equally. So yeah, creating an environment where there are no stupid questions, it's safe, and people are comfortable. Learning can happen better than in a seat.
I just know I could use this advice personally. Like, how did you deal with that intimidation factor and being a little bit scared? Like, oh, I'm joining you AES. Like, how do you just do it and just, submit the paper to AES, or just say, okay, I am at a level where I could mentor people? What kind of inner strength, how did you just...
Well, again, my practice with education, my professional experience in working with hundreds of students, young students, it's like playing piano or playing any instrument. What is it, 10,000 hours or something? That and speaking another language, I think, helps you with your ear. And I had to teach in a French school, which was my second language. All of those things, help you flex a muscle. So practice. I don't practice enough sometimes when I'm giving a talk. Like even today, I could have said, okay, I'm going to write this out so that I'm not, jumping from one topic to another. But I thought I need to be open to what your questions would be too. Practice. I used to be so nervous that my mouth would shake if I stood up to, meet somebody new. I was very shy as a young girl. And I think that's a challenge. You just get over it. And maybe it's why I pushed myself, to these jobs. I mean, I went to McGill not knowing anyone. Well, first I moved from my province to study music in another province, didn't know anyone.
And you're from the East Coast,
I went to New Brunswick. I grew up in New Brunswick. And I studied music and PEI. I studied education degree back in New Brunswick. I taught school in Newfoundland and in New Brunswick. I went to McGill. I went to Banff. I went to Nova Scotia. I went to Iowa. I went back to Banff, and then I did other things. But now I'm in Victoria on the very west coast of Canada. If this doesn't work, I'll be in the ocean. But
how you just got used to standing up and being on the panel and submitting the paper and doing those actions that are so important for us if we do want to make it 10%, not 5%, and then 20%, and make it less intimidating for both sides for us to be communicating and have that collaborative, diverse environment.
Well, being in education and continuing to study, I mean, my master's degree, because I did 2 years of undergrad in addition to my undergrads at McGill, and 2 years of the master's program, and then another 2 years by the time I finished the thesis. It was the longest master's in history, but all of that, there's no fast way to do anything. I learned that early on. And I had to be comfortable and in my comfort zone. And lots of times I wasn't comfortable, but I pushed myself to do things. But I was also with people who did this kind of work and who did present papers and it was mentoring. John Ergel saying to me, you can do this. Like, I could have written this. This is like really good information, I got ahead more in my career, I think, in Canada, but I was promoted more in the US. I think it's just different cultures do things differently. And so, I had people support me and say, you should do this. And if people don't do that, you may not do it. So you have to kind of be your own cheerleader as well. Like I said, the idea of going to AES was frightening to me. Presenting a paper was frightening. And then becoming president, I mean, it's just, somebody... Ron Stryker had been a faculty once and said to me, I'm going to put your name forward as governor. And I got it. And, that's maybe something where there's always, this idea that AES is something up in the sky and you have to go for. It's a small group of people running things. And for a while it was like too small, and I think they have a nice business model now. And they're doing a lot more online. And so it's really good. But you can easily get involved if you know how. I promoted a lot of students to go and become part of the student delegate assembly. One from Japan, a girl I had really said, you need to go and do this so that you bring attention also to your country and your school. And just put yourself out there. If you're a young student and you're part of the AES and you're part of a school, because usually you have to be part of an AES chapter, put your name forward. Go forward and say, this is what I'd like to do. Go talk to the people who are doing it now. You have to put in some effort, but, talk to the people whose music you love. Talk to the people whose job you'd like to have. I was afraid. Yeah, I was nervous. I did it. And I obviously got something back from that and continued to challenge myself. And my career became my life. And if anything, I didn't balance. And so if I would say to anybody else, balance, it doesn't hurt to have both. But maybe as a female and doing everything I was doing and trying to keep the level up there, I had to do what I had to do in order to make it happen. And if I hadn't done that, I'm not sure others would have stepped in. They would have if I'd hired them, but if I didn't have the funding to. But I had so much help along the way. Like, I've always had amazing staff. I could never have done what I did without the staffing we had. And I fought for the staff. Mm-hmm. You have to have staff who also benefit from what you're doing. So, surround yourself with good people. Push yourself to do some things. And maybe some things don't do. I mean, probably there were things I didn't have to do. I could have balanced a little better, but I did what I did. And so I'm grateful.
One of the things I've been missing so much during this COVID is my team and the diverse skills they had and just having a team. But anyways.
It's fun when you have a group of people who love doing what they're doing, and you can encourage that. It's fun to go to work, no matter what's happening around you, you have this bubble of people who love what they're doing and who continue to make a difference. And even when things aren't good, you try not to let any of that affect that, incredible bubble and group.
It's kind of expanded with our technologies over this time with all these, SoundGirls has been putting on so many panels and webinars and so AES, and it's kind of made it a little bit more accessible. Like I didn't have to go all the way to Vienna to hear Amandine talk.
I think that is amazing. Yeah, because there's so many well-kept secrets. I joined this artificial intelligence, virtual reality, augmented reality conference. I managed to get in at AES, and it blew my mind. I mean, really, everybody had their own little avatar, and at a break, you could walk down a hallway, and if you stopped, I mean, we're all in our living rooms, but if you stopped and listened to a conversation, those avatars would look at you like you were like, hello, why are you here? We're talking personally. And the sound, the way they had built the sound in the auditoriums, so that it really sounded natural as you went by different conversations. And you had to walk into the auditorium and take a seat. And, I'm sure I fell downstairs and would have had a broken leg and different things, but moving my little avatar around. But I learned so much from that conference. It was bizarre, but I never would have done that if we hadn't, had this pandemic. And I wouldn't have joined, a lot of these talks when you're at AES, you're running from one room to another. You're trying to listen to people, but you're bumping into people in hallways. This way you can just zoom in, listen to something, in your pajamas and then, make dinner or something. It's really quite unique the way we're using Zoom. And I think if we're talking about women in audio, it's an easy time to help promote that and make that kind of be something we don't have to talk about and just do because there's so many things available to all of us equally. That's really nice.
I know it's a different format and definitely not the same as being in person, but it's not all negative either. There are some positives to come out of it.
Oh, so many.
I do have a question. I'm wondering, are you surprised at how much you've achieved in your career and your path?
Well, I always I think I'm harder on myself than anyone else, and yeah, I needed to stop and pat myself on the back a little bit, because I always had these different challenges, whether it was initially working in a French school where, because I was in Francophone, they weren't too happy about that, but I spoke well, and I also did internship programs to improve my French. I grew up in a French town, but my family was English. And, when I came out of there, I had a really nice letter from the superintendent. So that was a challenge. And then, going into music was even a challenge because although I played piano, I didn't study as hard as I should have growing up in an area where none of my friends, really did. But my mom pushed me. And then I really pushed that and, got my music degree. And I'm a decent amateur pianist. And then the education thing, following in that footstep, the McGill thing that seemed like, wow, technology, this is not my area. But it certainly was my area, and as much as it was anybody else's. And I'm more interested in the producing side of it now. I certainly can tell people where to put the microphones and when it doesn't sound good and when there's too much reverb. And lots of times I go out and move the microphones. Anyone that works with me knows this, but I have to move it to hear it. But I've moved into the leadership facilitator, music producer role than actually learning every new piece of gear that comes out. But I have a lot of opinions about the gear. And when I don't know what to do, I will call people whose opinion I trust, that know more than I do. And it has surprised me how many people are adverse, once they get to know me, they know I'll do this, that I ask a lot of opinions before making a decision. And I'm not going to say men, but mostly because it has been men that I've seen this happen with, want to make a decision and do the research themselves when I'm working with them. And I think, well, why don't I just put you in touch with this person because they're doing that already, on a very high scale, and they're happy to help us. And lots of times people don't really, they don't want to feel they don't have the answer themselves. And I think that's kind of a weakness more than a strength. Mm-hmm. That makes sense to you?
It does actually. I always think that my ears are my reference, but I always want feedback
Me
from
too.
people in the space because they're hearing it slightly different, and it's ultimately not just for me. It's ultimately for the audience and the clients, right? So
That's very good. That's something I do as well. I remember one of my engineers who was such an amazing engineer, and he came more from the pop side and me more from the classical, so we made a good team. Um, Graham said to me once, he used to wonder, he'd say to me, "Why are you asking me? Like, you know this?" And I'd say, "Because you have great ears and I want to know what you think." And so, he learned a lot from me and me from him in that sense. And I love being able to, and he taught, the participants so much. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm talking a lot about myself today, but the truth is I couldn't do what I did without the people I had around me. And I always ask them, I like asking the musicians. I have to be careful not to bring them in too early, but I like explaining what I'm doing, but then showing them so that they stop talking, what a quick edit will do. And then they can let that go. It's like, yeah, I played this better in that take, but then in this measure, I'm better. It's like, okay, here. And as a producer, you really do have to learn, so much has changed in the business side of things today, but what remains the same is the respect for the composer's wishes, getting the best performance you can from the artist, and knowing how to get the best sound you can from an acoustic space or any studio you're in. And that hasn't changed. So yeah, bringing the musicians up to speed on that and having them realize it's not as hard as they thought, as Judy Sherman would say, or that they learn so much. These are comments she gets often from musicians. I run into the same thing. Yeah, it's asking people's input. And, sometimes a musician will come in and they'll say, well, I don't know, And I think, well, no, like if you tell us that it needs to sound blue, we can't do that. But if you say it sounds a little harsh or, doesn't sound like me, or play them different versions when you move some microphones and get their input. I mean, it affects the sound so much. And that training takes a while. You can still do it if you haven't been trained in a quote unquote Tonmeister type program, about recording acoustic music and acoustic spaces. But you can train people to do that. And it makes a difference whether they're working in film and rock and roll or jazz, classical, doesn't matter. I mean, it's important ear training. Ear training is so important in what we do. So I think I've been all over the map and talked a lot, but if you have more specific questions, it will focus me a little better. But you've had great questions. I just think now I've probably covered everything I have to say.
what do you want people to remember about, what would you like, if it was 50 years from now, what would you want people to remember? What are your proudest moments in a sense?
I think the lives that I've, affected. I've had many people thank me and say that without, that experience, they wouldn't be where they are. So I think that's my thanks. It might not be on a bulletin board or written up anywhere, but, that old saying, people don't remember who said this. I can't remember what you did, but they remember how you made them feel. So yeah, that.
If you didn't do audio, if you didn't go into audio, what do you think? What else would you have done?
I like leadership roles. I like being able to make a difference in people's lives. So, I mean, artistically, I have, I think, a decent ear. I like languages, so maybe linguistics, psychology. Yeah, so that's why I think I'm drawn to producing. I don't necessarily like staring at a score and blocking a score forever for editing. That's not so much fun, but it's very artistic. So probably music producing. Education was always great, but to keep doing it, and being a teacher is very, very hard work in with young students, because especially being in a specialty role, like music teachers or French teachers. You know, it used to be at least, 30 kids at the door every half hour, and you don't get a break to go for a coffee, and you don't get a break because you're having a bad day and go for a walk. You're in that timeline, and so are the students. So you have to try to make it interesting. Mm-hmm. I think education is really important because of the way I was able to run this sort of not only differentiated teaching model at Banff, but a differentiated learning model, a different way of learning by being very flexible and putting different things together. I think there's a lot to be said for what we should be doing today, especially now with Zoom and online education. So education, probably something to do with helping people, but I don't know what. I just kind of kept falling into something new with what I did and looking for challenges and going to places that I'd never been or where I knew nobody, and taking the good and bad with that, realizing it might not be exactly what I wanted to do, but I learned a lot from it. Yeah. The lessons learned, it'd be nice to go back and change some things in your life. I don't know that I would definitely necessarily change a lot of what I did, with my working life. Some things I certainly would, but, or I would have made, other decisions earlier on, but no. Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to mention or talk about that we don't?
I just think that you're very good at what you do, and you're great at, I think it's really exciting that you're going on to study. And with Amandine, I think she's an amazing mentor at Lethbridge and everywhere else she's been. But I really wish you good luck. And you can I will say thank you to SoundGirls as well.
I'm just so grateful to SoundGirls for just the visibility, and just, it's so inspiring to see all these amazing women who...
Well, amazing artists. They're people that do things that I admire. I mean, doing live sound and starting out in that industry, that's a real challenge, where everybody sees you. It's like, and to be fair, I was really lucky at, when I was at Banff, there was a whole team, an audio theater team that we worked so closely with. But, and although we did some live, within our studios, for compositions all the time, we had a whole team of people trained in live sound. And I'd see some women over the years in that area, and I'd always encourage them as well when we worked with them. But it's tough. I think that would be, really tough. I mean, there is the whole thing about carrying equipment and heavy equipment. When I first arrived at Aspen, I was quite shocked because even though people have to be able to carry something because it's hit the ground running. There's no time to prepare. You have to get there. You have some training, and they have to have enough background that, they either are working with someone and learning it very quickly, because we have to capture everything. And there are, 400 events in 8 weeks. It's quite amazing. But I would see with the training, there'd be this one young woman who weighed nothing, and, big burly guy that I also hired behind her carrying the same piece of gear, or it was her turn to carry it and he was doing something else. And I thought, whoa, we have to be smart about this stuff too, being feminine or being masculine, having strength or being weaker physically, you can't expect equality in those areas when it comes. That is something that used to bother me, even at McGill, I must say, when I was treated as equally, but when I'm carrying something that is really heavy and someone's talking and they're going to allow me to keep carrying that in there, I'm thinking like, hey, could use some help. I never really understood that part of it. I think we need to use common sense. Yeah.
And nobody should be lifting 100-pound amplifier on their own. Like this is a great opportunity for teamwork too.
Yeah. Yeah, and growing up with brothers, like that's what they would carry, and I could carry something lighter. Just be natural that someone would help you. And I mean, you're always going to run into people who are going to help you, and you're going to run into people who won't. And you can choose to just remember one, or you can choose to, help someone understand that. Another way would have been better, or you can just ignore whatever works. I mean, you have to be perceptive. That's what a good music producer is. You have to be perceptive to the musician and what they want. But an audio engineer, live sound engineer, sound designer, we are such artists in what we do. And we have to be psychologists, artists, smart, professional, and, develop these incredible people skills while we're learning. And so internship places are wonderful. They're few and far between, but that's why I've always chosen to work in that type of area, because I think there's a way to help people get to the next step without leaving altogether because they've had a bad experience.
Yeah. And to keep at it, obstacles come up no matter what you do in life.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to work hard, but be nice to people. It's they go hand in hand. Doesn't come easily. And there's so much information out there on the internet. There's a lot of self-training you can do, but get off your chair and go for a walk too, and, protect your hearing and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. It's nice to do this down memory lane, because I've had a few years where I've been freelancing and doing more work in the summers and having some time off, which has been really, a godsend to me as well. Like to be able to think about doing other things and actually doing other things. It's kind of fun. Yeah. But it's nice to reminisce and remember what I've done. And I must say I'm very happy to still continue to, do some teaching, and some things were canceled, some producing with the Royal Conservatory with Barry Schiffman, who's an amazing colleague of mine from Banff, who's in Toronto now, and at Banff returning, James bringing me back to do some work there. Aspen, some music producing, some consulting. I was in The Hague this year for the second time, and an amazing program with lovely students. So that's very energizing. And, there are other people I would recommend to do these things down now. If they came to me, I'd give them a ton of names. But it's nice to still feel like I have something to give back. And I am looking also to do a little more. Like I said, I'm not interested really in writing. I'm interested in doing. And I think I'd like to be able to help where I can. So if I find something, I'll do it. One last kick at the can.
I would love to ask this one specific question that I'm super interested in, and that's this question. Can you tell us about your role as Director of Audio for the Banff Centre, and what specifically were your job duties?
Oh, that's a very good question. Well, because I had been a work study in the program when I first left McGill, I knew some of the people, especially in the music department there. And so when they decided to create a music and sound program, my name came up because I had worked so closely with the musicians when I was a participant in the program years before. So Isabel Ralston, who at the time, she and her husband ran the music program at Banff for many years. And it was mostly classical and contemporary music, classical contemporary, with jazz in the summer. And they invited me back. And so I went through different titles in the beginning, but basically my job was always the same. I always directed the audio area. And I was able to build the program from what it was, which was similar to other internship programs at the Banff Centre, where you were exposed to wonderful artists and great opportunities to meet people. But I followed the music program in their way of bringing in faculty, guest faculty from academia and industry to work with the students and the audio participants, as well as, musicians in many cases. So it was a differentiated teaching model, bringing in guest faculty. The audio engineers were treated as artists, and I grew that program, although we started in small numbers until they had enough to do, and grew that program so that we supported not only music concerts, but started recording residencies where people would come to record CDs, built up the recording studio equipment, built up the equipment for concert recording as well, got into not only as director, but executive producer of all the CDs that went through there, directing the audio program for work with all of the performing arts when it came to recording, literary arts, Indigenous arts. Because of the audio program and the fact that we supported not only classical and jazz programs, which went hand in hand with audio throughout the year, we began an indie band residency. That was with Barry Schiffman, who was then director of music, and expanded the genres of music that came through the center. We also started film scoring opportunities that continue today, and some singer-songwriter programs that continue. And it was really my job to grow the program in audio so that it was also international. The participants came from around the world. I got to, I started working with the AES while I was at Banff, became a governor, and then started speaking at different schools like the Paris Conservatory, in Berlin, the Detmold Tonmeister programs, and bringing students from these programs, Poland, etc., besides McGill, New York University, Peabody, and bringing people in locally. In one case, someone from high school who their whole training was at Banff Centre. So we worked on a local, a national, and an international level by training people, probably 8 to 10 people a term. And in the beginning, we had 3 terms a year. So that was bringing through up to about 30 work study or practicum participants through the Banff Centre in audio yearly. And our job was not only to support concerts, support is not a bad word in audio, but to support professionally musicians in archiving, recording concerts, doing broadcast work, putting CDs together, bringing in faculty to work with the musicians and the audio engineers, bringing in producers, bringing in sound artists to work with sound artists and audio at the same time, putting on international conferences, and taking advantage of the fact that we were in an international destination for artists in the mountains with hotel and dining facilities to make this all possible.
Oh, wonderful. I know I've been to the Banff Centre for a sound summit, and that experience was absolutely amazing. So I'm very impressed by the work that comes out of the Banff Centre.
Yeah, it's really, it was really, curating a diverse team of in-house professionals, the staff, who I don't mention enough. I could never do this alone. We had amazing staff, amazing artists in all areas. And, we were able to bring in people with different backgrounds at different levels to work with each other. And again, they learned more from each other than any faculty you brought in. Faculty learned a lot from the participants in the program. So it was very exciting. We allowed participants to learn as much from each other, as I said. And, it was my job to meet the different needs of the different participants in the program and help them fill in the blanks in their training, or help them understand what their real passion was, or open their eyes to new opportunities in audio that they might not have known about had they not come there.
What were some of the projects that you worked on?
Oh my goodness. Well, all of the amazing concerts that happened year round, classical, jazz, and then the indie band program was quite exceptional, as that took place in the studio. So bringing in producers to work with a lot of these bands that hadn't had the opportunity to work in a studio with a producer before. And as I said, the audio program benefited the musicians equally as it did any aspiring engineer or producer, because all of these musicians got to work in a studio with a producer, or with audio engineers who knew what they were doing, and got to hear and listen and look at what we did in a very artistic way, not just as a support. So what projects? We sometimes recorded up to 20 CDs a year. It was a lot at that time. In and around all of the concert recording and, residencies we had. We did a sound and vision residency once with the director of visual arts and audio, and brought in different people with different backgrounds for that, who continue to go to the Banff Centre today and keep in touch. We ran a training area for women in broadcasting across Canada through Chorus Entertainment, and brought in hosts from NPR and CBC and different people to work with them. There's an international string quartet competition that goes on every 3 years at Banff, and early on when I arrived there, we started putting a CD together for the winners from the live events. And then making a recording of a CD part of the prize package for the winners. And this happened again with the Honan's piano competition in Calgary, where we lots of times went in and worked with them on recording their the competition itself, but also providing a recording residency for the winners of that competition, and bringing in producers to work with our recording engineers, or bringing in recording engineers to work with our recording engineers on some of these projects. So that kind of thing. With Indigenous arts, we put out some lovely CDs. One was completely with women's voices, Indigenous women's voices. It was just a lovely CD. It was nominated for Juno. We've had other CDs that were nominated for Juno recorded at Banff as well, quite a few. One with the St. Lawrence String Quartet and the Griffin Trio, who won for a recording that I had the opportunity to engineer and produce. So just so many things, and research projects with McGill and with Stanford University, audio over networks. We did that kind of thing, putting on professional conferences in surround sound, drawing attention to the Banff Centre as not only an educational place, but a place for people to come and do residencies and work within the programs we offered.
So is there anyone else that you would recommend we interview for the SoundGirls Living History Project?
Wow. Oh, well, SoundGirls. Well, Amandine, Poppy Crum, Marie Ebbing, Jennifer Nolson, Nancy, forget your last name, Nancy, Tung Chen, Liz Bellotti, who was someone I hired, but I haven't met or haven't worked with yet at Iowa, but I've met her at AES a couple times. And she's been in audio a long time. Studied with a former student of mine from Peabody, and then she's worked at Vail as well, and she's now at McGill. So she's, really chosen her career carefully. I have so many. They're going to hate me for, probably the people I work with more closely I haven't mentioned, but I can send you names, but there's so many. I could give you such a list, and some of these people are, it's nice too to see people doing different things. I mean, so in classical music, there may be, you have Judith Sherman and Marta de Francisco, and a lady from Telarc, I forget her name right now, Marion Schweibel, who was with BIS in Sweden, Mireille Faure, who Faure, who is a major producer in France, music producer in France right now. She was somebody I met years ago. Agnieszka Rodzinska, who is the president right now of AES, and has worked at NYU in the technology program there for years, should be on SoundGirls. So many other women. Past producer at AES, who's now the treasurer again, Marina Bossi. Yeah, I mean, there are just, a lot of professional women, young and a bit older, my age. That it's, I know Leslie Ann Jones is interviewed everywhere, and she should be. But there are many, many, many more, and she would be the first to tell you that. Leslie was great. Once doing an interview, I was listening to her, and she did mention at the time, I was at Banff, and she said, that's a place that has a lot of women. So she noticed it as being a faculty. But yeah, I have a list of alumni with so many women, and from different countries as well, if you're interested in that.
Very much.
I could help you with that. And any of these women, that I've mentioned, they would give you a list of, a dozen more. Hannelore Guité from France, Paris. Hannelore, it's Hanne, it's pronounced Hannelore. Again, you're doing a lot of work with recording. So just so many, their names will come back, but I could give you names, yeah. And women doing, I met a woman in Vancouver just this year or last year on a panel. Such an amazing indie producer. And I don't have her name in front of me, but she would be amazing. I listened to her work and I thought, a lot of times people get noticed because they go to a place like Banff or others where they're introduced to faculty who then help them. And like every industry, it's up to us to try to put those people in touch with those that will make a difference in their life. Many of them will always have a great career because they're hardworking and people around them will see them, but they may not get to where they could have been unless we give them a push or highlight them in some way. Some people are really great at promoting themselves. They don't need any help. And others are, frankly, they're more about the work. Not that the people that promote themselves aren't, but some people just deserve to be promoted. Like a Sean Everett, who is promoted simply because of what he does, but was one of the most humble people I've ever met and still is. Particularly from the Paris Conservatory, we had a lot of women. Amandine Prat, who you are studying with at Lethbridge now, would be great to interview. Coralie Vincent, who came from there as well and also did work in Canada before returning to France. I think in PEI, she did some work there and in Montreal. Mireille Faure, who I met early on, who has a big job as a classical music producer in France. So that would be an interesting discussion. Jennifer Nelson, who I brought to Banff from the Hart School, and she went on to McGill, and then she went to Tanglewood. She worked with me last summer at Aspen as well. She's a very talented young woman. Liz Bellotti, who I haven't worked with yet, but I met at AES and accepted this summer at Aspen, but program was canceled. But she has quite a unique background. Poppy Crum, of course, neuroscientist, head scientist for Dolby, who I met when she was very young at the University of Iowa when I was there. Marta Olko, who came from Poland, who then went on and did her PhD, fully funded at NYU, and is working in immersive audio, doing great work. Marie Ebbing, who was at Banff quite a while ago and did a lot of sound editing for Ren Kleiss in San Francisco. And Magda Piotrowska, I think is her name now. She came from Poland and was at Banff. She's now one of the education chairs for AES. And my goodness, Tung Chen, who not only studied at Peabody, but came to Banff. And I also got her to go to Aspen and worked with her in 2019. She works for Saturday Night Live, doing sound for them, music recording. And just a very, very interesting young woman, originally from China. I have so many names here, but I think I've given you quite a few. And I could go after them. And any one of these women, if you asked for a list of names, they all, Nancy Conforti worked with me. She just newly graduated from McGill. She worked at Aspen last summer, very talented as well. Any of these women would give you a list of 10 other women. So what SoundGirls is doing is different than what a lot of people are doing, in that they're really just putting it out there. And there's no excuse for anybody not putting women on a panel. All you have to do is click that button. And I went through and went, wow, look at this. Like, somebody is actually documenting this properly. And yet, you know, they're going with the people they know. So I'm glad you reached out, because what I've done, my work at Banff for a long time was in a bubble. The international world knew audio at Banff almost more than locally, because just because there aren't paid internships, many of them, that give you that kind of experience. But we need more of those. I mean, there's Stavanger in Norway, there's Banff. Interlaken is opened up again. I think that's mostly for US citizens, though, same as Tanglewood. The staffing is a great opportunity for people out of school, but again, and dealing more for classical backgrounds. Aspen, the same. Right now, you know, being a US citizen, of course, there are tons of amazing people in the US, but it's nice when you can do something more internationally and draw from different programs, because they learn so much from each other. But I'd like to see more of those opportunities available, because it's a shared language now between music and audio, and film and audio, and art and audio, but such an important connection. So anyway, I've given you names, but those people can give you many more names, and if we keep doing this, it'll trickle down.
Awesome. Can you maybe tell us a little bit more about the Aspen Music Festival and the Edgar Stanton audio recordings?
I'm director of the Edgar Stanton Audio Recording Center. So for years, Aspen has been one of those really go-to places for, I think it's like 600 music students from around the world that go there. They bring in staff and faculty teaching to work, do master classes. They get to perform in a student orchestra, and a combined faculty, staff, student orchestra, and then a more professional orchestra. But the training ground for so many people that continue to give back and go back there, like Renee Fleming and many others. A lot of people in the US and, you know, in Europe, many musicians got their start at places like Aspen, in the same way that many do at Banff as well, although Banff covers more genres and less is, less concentrated on orchestras and larger ensembles. And, you know, Aspen has just a really big presence for classical music, and they put on about 400 events, you know, opera, recording, contemporary music, of course, some crossover with, you know, jazz and creative music. In 8 weeks in the summer, so people have to hit the ground when they go there. And I've gone after people, you know, that I know from programs like Banff, McGill, Tanglewood, New York, Peabody, lots of places. And we look for people from the real world who are teaching, who are out there, who are amazing recording engineers that want the opportunity to be able to work in a group environment and have the chance to record people of this caliber. 400 events in 8 weeks is a lot. There's a lot of scheduling. And I had really great help from a young woman named Sarah McCarthy, who came from San Francisco University last summer. And without her and Jennifer Nelson, scheduling was just a nightmare for that many people. And they were incredible help and incredible engineers. So I've worked with such great women everywhere I've gone. And as I said to you earlier, I think my first summer, my only summer to date at Aspen, there were 11 of us, including myself, and 6 women and 5 men. So good numbers. Not intentionally, just happened that way.
Is there anything else you'd like to mention?
No, I think I'd just like to say that in today's world, I don't think there are still a few glass ceilings, but there are fewer and fewer, and there are so many women experts as well as male experts. And, I think we all have, left and right brain, different sides of our personality. And I think we're all the same sometimes when it comes to respect in audio, so that women especially don't feel they can't do anything, and to be their own advocate. Sometimes we're really good at standing up for others, but less so when it comes to ourselves, including me. So I really think I would encourage everybody to be their own advocate, and to go after what you want, and not accept no as the only answer. Just look elsewhere, and there might be a better opportunity elsewhere. By not taking one road, you'll succeed by taking another, and find people who support you in what you do. That's really important, versus trying to just overcome challenges. Like, really look for those who support what you do and appreciate it.
Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to say maybe about your experience with AES?
I just think it's such an incredible community, and I had the great opportunity of someone putting my name forward early on as a governor. And while I was governor, I spent a lot of time helping with education events. I was an education chair at the time, but there's more than enough work for a lot of people, not just one chair. So I helped develop some of the events in San Francisco and LA at some of the international conferences, went after sponsorships for prizes, tried to get the students more involved with a bigger role, and taking the students out of their area and ensuring that they went to the main events, and that there were main events put on by the education area that many people went to because they were just as interesting as what was happening elsewhere. And the AES is a great place for students and audio professionals alike to be part of. It really is a family. People are friendly, and it's a small world at the top end in audio, and you can basically get to meet whoever you like. It's a really, really important organization. It has helped me immensely, and it helped me grow the program at Banff by bringing in people from other programs and introducing, that internship program to them. And Aspen, I mean, I still have people in Europe saying, when can you accept people from our program, or Canadians? But yeah, I mean, it's just, AES is a professional organization that offers training, that offers companionship, that offers education at a very, very high level. And you don't have to go to a convention just to be part of AES. In fact, now that it's online, I saw that many more students were entering the competition because they didn't have to show up at a convention and pay to go to New York or Europe. And so it makes it much more competitive and much more fair in many ways. Mm-hmm. And they're putting on so many events right now. It's just it's the only professional society dedicated to audio internationally, period. I mean, what more is there to say? Become a member.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to the October conference.
Oh yeah, me too. And I love giving names. I mean, I've been on some of those panels, but I always felt, I tend to enjoy, I mean, it's been nice to be interviewed, but I tend to enjoy helping facilitate and put things together and seeing where the gaps are and, putting names in there. So if there's ever anything I can do to help SoundGirls, let me know. I'll help out with that.
Thank you.
I think I should give back to women in audio, and maybe didn't help out as much, by running that area early on. But I think I did a lot for women in audio just by making sure I had equal numbers of men, women, and yeah. I learned a lot about women in audio by having a student who, I learned to use. When someone is transgender, like different pronouns, they and them, and that was a real eye opener for me. It taught me a lot about gender and our view of, there are no lines to be drawn, and I think we just have to really, I had some men in the program who were extremely humble and mild and shy, and other women who were, more aggressive, and vice versa. I mean, so I think that. There's a lot to be said for just people being respectful of each other in programs like internship programs like Banff and Aspen, and in university programs. I mean, I hear a lot of people say there aren't, we don't have many women, maybe next year, but they really do have to put women on panels and on faculty or adjunct. The more a university can bring in adjunct people, the better it is for the program. I understand funding is a problem, but yeah, there are ways to do that, even through running an AES section.
That's wonderful. Thank you for adding your story to the SoundGirls Living History Project. Your story, along with the others, will be archived and made available publicly for educational use and research.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me. I hope we keep in touch.
Well, please do. Yeah, feel free to, if you're ever in Calgary, let me know.
Yeah, I will. And good luck with your program. I will keep my eye out because I will expect to see and hear great things.
I will do my best. No guarantees, but I will do my best.
Well, thank you. And thanks for those listening. Yeah, a little long-winded, but it's been fun to talk about.
It's been just such a delight to hear about your career and to meet you. And I'm very thankful for all the work you've done and for SoundGirls for this opportunity.
Well, thank you. And thanks, SoundGirls. That's very impressive what they're doing.